Michael was already gone by the time I finally woke up. Always gone, that man. Work, work, work. I dragged myself to the bathroom, the mirror reflecting a woman I barely recognized. It wasn't just the missed sleep keeping me down, it was the whole thing. My life. This marriage, Michael wouldn't even look at me the same way anymore. Like I'd faded into the background, just another piece of furniture. That networking thing last month, that's when things change. It was stupid, some fancy shindig for Michael's company. I met Robert there, and, well, it was like something flipped inside me. He wasn't some hotshot businessman in a slick suit, he just saw me. Made me feel good for the first time in ages. Talked to me like I actually had a brain, not just some wifey he left at home to make dinner and keep the house clean. We started sneaking around. Lunch dates that stretched into long afternoons, stolen moments in dark hotel rooms. I knew it was crazy, risky, but it was thrilling. Like I was finally alive again instead of just floating through days that all blurred together. Then, a few weeks back, I missed my period. The test came back positive, and my world just froze. It wasn't Michael's. No way. It was Robert's. I knew it the second I saw those two lines. Part of me panicked, the sensible part that knew how insane this all was. But another part. This twisted, dark part. It saw an opportunity. Michael had been bugging me about kids for ages. Complaining about his friends bragging on their toddlers, asking when we would get started. Now, I could finally give him what he wanted. Just not the way he expected. It seemed insane, but as the days went by, it felt right. Like payback for all those nights I'd waited alone for him to come home, for the way his eyes glazed over when I tried to talk about my day. Telling Michael was the hardest part. Faking that joy as he beamed at me, hugging me like I'd given him the world. It made me sick. But I also felt this rush, this twisted sense of power, knowing I was playing the game, and he had no idea. Let him be the doting dad. It was what he deserved, wasn't it? After all, I was giving him exactly what he'd always wanted. Lily was 3 months old, and it was getting harder. Harder to look at Michael and see anything besides a fool, a gullible man so blinded by his own stupid dreams he hadn't even noticed his wife had slipped right through his fingers. The way he beamed at the baby, changed her diapers, sang those goofy songs. It made my stomach churn. He talked constantly about the future now, our little family, saving for Lily's college, those silly matching Halloween costumes parents make their kids wear. Like there was an us anymore. I knew it was wrong, messed up, but every time he smiled down at Lily, this bitter satisfaction twisted inside me. He got his wish, didn't he? Wasn't this what he always wanted? Still, some nights I couldn't sleep. I'd stare at that perfect little baby face, and something like guilt would creep over me. She didn't deserve this, didn't ask for any part of my crazy plan. Was it wrong to punish her for the sins of her father? At times, I'd almost convince myself to tell Michael the truth, to fall apart and beg forgiveness. But then I'd remember his distracted gaze, the way he'd barely heard me the past few years, and my resolve would harden. This was payback for his coldness, his neglect, the way he'd taken me for granted for years. Things were getting dicier with Robert, too. It had been weeks since I'd seen him. At first, I told him I needed space, that Michael was getting suspicious. He bought it, but now he was calling more, asking weird questions. He seemed different, edgy. I'd see him on the street sometimes, the way his eyes lingered on me, almost desperate. When I told him it was over, that I couldn't see him anymore, he didn't take it well. You think you can just cut me out? He hissed over the phone, his voice low and dangerous. That's not how this works, Sarah. A chill ran through me. He sounded almost threatening. I pushed it away. He didn't know, couldn't know. It was my secret, and mine alone. Yet, that night, I double-checked the locks on all the doors before slipping into Michael's bed. It wasn't for love, or even comfort. It was protection. Every time Michael's arm draped over me, I stiffened, imagining it was Robert's hand. I wasn't sure even Michael could save me now, not from my own twisted game. My whole life turned into an act. With Michael, it was all smiles and baby talk, pretending to be the perfect doting wife. I'd coo over Lily just like he wanted, listening to him drone on about her first this, her first that. It was like living with a stranger who wouldn't notice if I up and vanished. Then, there was Robert. Gone was that sweet guy from the networking thing. In his place was this jumpy, desperate mess. He wouldn't leave me alone. Calls at all hours, showing up at my yoga class with some lame excuse, that hungry look in his eyes that sent shivers down my spine. The other day, I was sure I saw him parked down the street, just watching the house. I tried to reason with him. It's over, Robert. You need to move on, forget me. I hissed into the phone, my heart pounding. His laugh was low and nasty, nothing like the sound I remembered. Forget you? How the hell do you think I'd do that, Sarah? Now, stop playing games and tell me who the hell he is. Who he is. The words chilled me. Did he suspect? The other night, in the heat of the moment, I almost slipped, almost told him the truth. I'd woken in a sweat, picturing Robert standing over Michael, rage twisting his face. It terrified me, but it also fueled that twisted little thrill, like I was playing with fire and getting away with it. Michael started noticing things, little things. My jumpiness, my distracted silences, the way I flinched once when he touched my shoulder. He'd try to pull me in, asking what was wrong with those concerned husband eyes. Each time, I'd brush it off, inventing some dumb excuse about work stress or a fight with my mom. He seemed to buy it, but that nagging doubt hung in the air between us, growing heavier each day. One afternoon, putting Lily down for a nap, my phone buzzed. Robert again. I ignored it, but that familiar dread twisted in my gut. Then it rang again, and again. What? I snapped when I finally picked up, hard in my throat. I'm on your street, Sarah. Might pop in and say hi to the proud papa. Ice flooded my veins. Robert was going to blow the whole thing wide open. Hands shaking, I slipped into the nursery. Michael and Lily were gone, probably off on one of their daddy-daughter walks. That gave me just enough time. For weeks I'd resisted, telling myself it was too risky, too extreme. But now, with Robert's threats and Michael's suspicions squeezing in on me, I felt cornered. Desperate. There, in the back of Lily's closet, tucked beneath a pile of baby blankets, was the nanny cam. One of those discreet ones, shaped like a teddy bear. Michael never would have suspected a thing. I'd bought it weeks ago, telling myself it was for security, but the dark, twisted part of me knew it was about control. I needed to know what happened when I wasn't there. With trembling fingers, I hid it on a high shelf, the tiny lens aimed at the crib. Then I switched on the live feed on my phone and waited. It didn't take long. A few hours later, I was at the grocery store when an alert popped up on my phone. It was the nanny cam. Michael was home. I swiped to watch, my heart pounding a frantic tattoo against my ribs. There he was, on the screen, bouncing Lily on his knee, grinning down at her. It should have been a sweet, innocent scene, but I couldn't shake the dread coiling in my gut. Then, Michael put her down, walked to his desk, and pulled out a folder. My stomach dropped. It was thin, with official-looking papers tucked inside. He sat down, frowning. Then he picked up his phone, dialed a number, and waited. Rick, it's Michael. Yeah, I wanted to check in. Did you find anything? Rick, I vaguely recognized the name. Private investigator. The blood drained from my face, and rage bubbled up, replacing the fear. So that's how Michael spent those late nights, working. He was on to me. He was checking up on me, trying to catch me in my lies. But I wouldn't let him. This was my game, and I wasn't about to lose. An idea sparked in my mind, a plan forming even as a new wave of panic crashed over me. I'd paint my own picture, plant my own seeds of doubt. Michael wanted a cheating wife? Fine, I'd give him one, he just picked the wrong target. My hands shook as I packed the bag, a few clothes, Lily's favorite stuffed rabbit, that stupid nanny cam. Robert was coming, there was no stopping him now, not after I'd shown him. The image burnt in my mind, Robert, staring at my phone screen, his face pale, then twisting into a mask of rage. I'd shown him the nanny cam footage, those endless hours of Michael with Lily, the feedings, the goofy dances, the whispered bedtime stories. It was my ace in the hole, proof that he was the fool, not me. He's not the father, you idiot. I'd shrieked at Robert, my voice cracking. It took him a moment, his eyes wild and unfocused, to understand. Then, the fury in him shifted, turning on me. You stole my child, he'd roared, lunging across the tiny coffee table. I'd barely dodged his flailing fist. He called me names I won't repeat, his threats turning darker and uglier with each passing second. Then, just as quickly, it was over. He'd stormed out, slamming the door, leaving me trembling on the floor. Now, I had to disappear before he came back, and with Michael closing in, there was nowhere to go. That's when the thought hit me. The cabin. It was old, a little run down, but Michael never went there. My dad's inheritance, one of the few good things he'd ever left me. It was isolated, the perfect place to hide. The car was loaded, Lily dozed fitfully in her car seat. For a moment, watching her, that familiar pang of guilt crept in. But then I'd remember Michael's face when he found out, Robert's crazed threats, and my resolve hardened. We'd be better off here, away from them both, starting over. As the car rolled down the street, I saw Robert in my rearview mirror, striding toward my house with that same purposeful fury. That image spurred me on. I wasn't looking back, not anymore. I glanced down at Lily, this innocent pawn caught in my twisted game, and hit the accelerator. Whatever it took, I was going to win this, even if winning meant losing everything else. The police station was a blur, harsh lights, cold metal chairs, the smell of sweat and stale coffee. I sat numbly, Lily whimpering in my arms, as some tired-looking cop took my statement for what felt like the 100th time. Michael was in another room, probably telling his own twisted version of events. What a mess. Hours earlier, it was like a bomb had gone off. I'd heard the shouting first, Michael's furious roar, Robert's voice pitched high and desperate. Then, the sounds of a fight, thuds, furniture crashing, Lily's panicked cries. I'd raced from the cabin, clutching her close, and found both men locked in a brutal struggle on the porch. Michael, face contorted with a rage I'd never seen, was on top, pummeling Robert. Blood smeared Robert's mouth and his eyes were wild, filled with a mix of terror and fury. He was reaching beneath the porch swing, fingers fumbling for something. My heart hammered a frantic tattoo. A gun? No, it was the nanny cam's teddy bear, smashed, its tiny plastic lens glinting on the splintered wood. I screamed, desperate to stop them, but then the sirens wailed in the distance, rising closer. Neighbors appeared on their lawns, phones in hand, eyes wide. That's when Michael and Robert froze, as if suddenly remembering they weren't alone. The fight drained out of them just as the police swarmed the cabin. Now, here I was. Michael had looked at me with pure hatred, his eyes promising a battle to come, a battle over Lily, over my lies, over a future turned to ash. I'd seen the news reports later, snatches on the station's TV. Domestic dispute turns violent, custody fight looms over love triangle. We were a tawdry sideshow, entertainment for the bored masses. Lily started to cry again, her tiny sobs tearing at me. As I rocked her, all I could think was that it wasn't over, not by a long shot. My intricate web of deceit had collapsed, and there was no escaping the consequences. Michael, Robert, the law, heck, even the entire town would want their pound of flesh. But as I looked down at my daughter, an unexpected surge of defiance rose in me. Whatever came next, I'd survive. I wasn't the same woman who started this mess, not anymore. I'd fight for Lily, tooth and nail, even if it destroyed me in the end. The stares followed me everywhere. In the grocery store, at the gas station, even walking Lily in the park. Whispers cut through the air like poisoned arrows. There she is. That awful woman. Homewrecker. It was like I had a scarlet letter branded on my forehead, a constant reminder of my sins. My so-called friends vanished overnight. No comforting casseroles on my doorstep, no texts or calls offering support. It was as if I were a contagious disease, to be avoided at all costs. Their silence was almost worse than their judgment. At least then, I would have had someone to fight against. News reports about the whole twisted mess were relentless. Photos of me splashed across the screen. My face pixelated in a pathetic attempt to hide my identity. They painted me as the villain, the heartless manipulator. Nobody cared about the years I'd spent feeling neglected, invisible. To the world, I was the monster, and Michael was the betrayed victim. Then, the letters started arriving. Some were from strangers filled with venomous rants, spewing hatred and disgust. Others were different from Robert. They were short, scrawled notes filled with insane promises about finding me, making me pay. Even behind bars, the crazy bastard wouldn't leave me alone. Fear became my constant companion. It was in the creak of a floorboard, the shadow that flickered in the corner of my eye. Michael didn't bother to hide his intentions either. His lawyer called, the voice on the other end crisp and cold, talking about DNA tests and a legal battle so ugly it would make the headlines for months. I knew I was trapped. If I stayed, they would tear me apart, shred by shred. I'd lose Lily, probably end up in jail. But where could I go? What could I do? Panic rose like acid in my throat. Then, an idea flickered, desperate, dangerous, but maybe my only chance. I could disappear, erase the old Sarah completely. The thought sent a thrill of something that felt like defiance down my spine. I wasn't done yet. As Lily napped, I packed a small bag and dug out the wad of cash stashed away for emergencies. I glanced in the mirror, hardly recognizing the haunted woman staring back at me. Then, with a last, long look at my sleeping daughter, I slipped out the door. It was time for a new chapter, a fresh start born out of desperation. They thought I was broken, but they were wrong. I wasn't just going to survive, I was going to vanish. The bus station was grimy, the air thick with the smell of diesel and cheap coffee. I clutched my ratty backpack, my fake ID burning a hole in my pocket. The new name, Emily, felt strange on my tongue, just another piece of the disguise. Sarah was dead, at least for now. My cell phone buzzed, I risked a glance at the screen, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm. It was Robert, the texts were short, chilling. Found you, running won't help, payback is coming. My hands shook as I blocked his number, but the dread remained, clinging like a cold sweat. He'd escaped. The news report had flashed across the motel's crappy TV the night before. Robert, out on some legal technicality, a promise of good behavior that was as worthless as the paper it was written on. I'd huddled in that dingy room, Lily curled protectively in my arms, knowing my flimsy escape plan was crumbling around me. The next few days were a blur of stolen glances over my shoulder, cheap motels, and gnawing fear. But it wasn't just Robert the first was running from. The cops had questions, reporters circled like vultures, and deep down, that nagging flicker of guilt wouldn't leave me alone. Was I really any better than Robert, putting Lily through this? Was my freedom worth the cost to her? Then came the phone call that shifted everything. It was Michael's lawyer again, but this time his voice wasn't cold, it was strained. Robert was escalating, threats about exposing my lies to the media, ruining me completely, unless he got what he wanted. I didn't even have to ask what that was. No, not money, it was Lily, he wanted Lily. That's when the desperation turned into something else, a jagged mix of fury and icy resolve. They thought they had me cornered, a trapped animal, but they'd underestimated me. I'd gotten this far, hadn't I? My hand clenched around the bus ticket to nowhere. I found a payphone, the kind they only have in bad movies, and dialed Michael's number. His voice, when it crackled on the line, was rough, edged with pain. For a moment, I almost wavered. Almost. Meet me, I told him, my voice steady. Tomorrow, noon, the pier. We need to talk. There was a long silence, then he spoke. His words weren't about forgiveness or second chances, but they cut through me anyway. Lily, he said, his voice thick, we need to do what's right for her. I hung up. It was time to stop running, time to face this head on. But this time, it would be on my terms, not theirs. One way or another, I'd make damn sure of it. The pier was crowded, tourists and locals mingling in the summer haze. I spotted Michael immediately. He stood stiffly by a railing, Lily clutched in his arms like a lifeline. She looked small and lost, those big brown eyes filled with a confusion that stabbed at me. He must have seen me too because he tensed, his knuckles widening on the railing. But he didn't turn away. He'd come, just like I knew he would. Lily hadn't, which meant he understood something, at least a little, about the danger. About Robert. My stomach churned as I approached. Was I doing the right thing? Dragging them both back into my mess? A flicker of doubt, the old, familiar guilt, tried to creep in. I shoved it down, no time for regrets now. She's beautiful, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Michael flinched, like he hadn't expected that, maybe thought I'd just yell at him. He stared at me, his eyes reflecting a whirlwind of emotions, anger, betrayal, but beneath it all, a weariness that echoed my own. Why? His voice was raw, why did you do it? I could have lied again, spun some story about loneliness, neglect. All of it was true, in a way. But the lies were what brought me here, to this precipice. I don't know, I admitted, hating the pathetic sound of it. I wanted to hurt you, I guess. Stupid reason, I know that now. We stood in an awkward silence, the bustle of the pier fading away. After a moment, Michael set Lily down. She toddled hesitantly towards me, and I knelt, opening my arms. She didn't rush into them like I'd feared. Instead, she looked at me, a questioning tilt to her small head. And then, it happened. A tiny flash of recognition, or maybe just the instinct of a child wanting comfort. She took a step towards me. Just one, but it was enough. Tears stung my eyes, the first I'd shed in days. That's when we heard it. Robert's voice, rising above the noise of crowd, laced with madness. There you are, BTCH, thought you could hide? It's over now. He emerged from the throng, wild-eyed and disheveled. My blood ran cold, and Michael shoved Lily back into his arms. There was a scuffle, shouts, people scattering. Robert lunged for me, but Michael stepped in the way. And then everything seemed to happen at once. A blur of movement, a sickening thud, a splash. And then, the day I tied the knot with Michael, it felt like we were smack in the middle of a movie scene. Autumn was showing off, splashing golden hues all over our quaint hometown chapel. Surrounded by the cheer of family and friends, it felt like nothing could touch us. Yeah, that was the dream, the kind you don't want to wake up from. Michael, with his big heart and a mind sharp as a tack, was all about fighting the good fight, making the world a fairer place one courtroom battle at a time. Fast forward a year, and that dream started to feel a bit more like I was talking to the walls. Michael's noble crusade had him chained to his work, leaving me rattling around in our house like a lone pea in a drum. Tried to drown the silence with painting, but let's be real, even Picasso would have felt lonely in that silence. Then came Alex. Met him at some fancy art gallery opening I dragged myself to, hoping to shake off the cobwebs. Guy was like a walking, talking adrenaline rush. Had this vibe about him that made you want to be part of whatever world he was the king of. And, damn, did he notice me? Made me feel like I wasn't just part of the furniture. Home life? Well, that started to crumble like a cookie in a toddler's grip. Michael and we began sparring over dumb stuff. Missed dinners turned into missed conversations, which turned into me carving out a slice of independence he didn't seem to like much. Alex, though, he was all about the night and making sure you remembered it. Started sneaking around with him, getting a taste of life on the wild side. Parties that lasted until the sun was too embarrassed to come out. Friends that made every night an adventure. Then came the day Michael found that hotel receipt. You could practically hear his heart crack, but the guy just swallowed it and put on his poker face. Didn't scream, didn't yell. Just that look of disappointment that's worse than any shouting match. The affair? It was like being on a high-speed train with no brakes. Thrilling, sure, but deep down, I knew I was heading for a crash. That guilt? Tried to ignore it, but it's like trying to tune out a fire alarm. So there you have it. A tale of two lives. The one I promised to cherish and the one that promised me the stars. Caught in the middle, trying to figure out where the hell I belong. Just when I thought things couldn't get more twisted, Michael pulls a rabbit out of his hat. A weekend getaway. A chance to glue back the pieces of our crumbling marriage. Seeing that hope flickering in his eyes, it was like a punch to the gut. A wake-up call I wasn't ready for. Guilt gnawed at me as we headed out, the silence in the car louder than any argument we'd ever had. The getaway was supposed to be our lifeline, but my phone buzzed non-stop, Alex's name flashing more than I cared to admit. Each message was a siren call I struggled to ignore. Lying to Michael about who was texting became a reflex, one I hated with every fiber of my being. Then, as if my little soap opera needed more drama, Alex's ex decided to crash the party. Outside a bar, looking like a scene straight out of a cheesy movie, she cornered me. He's not who you think he is, she said, her eyes burning a hole through the lies I'd been feeding myself. Did I listen? Hell no. I was too far gone, too wrapped up in Alex's spell. Back home. Every conversation with Michael felt like we were tiptoeing through a minefield, our home a battleground where no one wins. We were strangers, sharing nothing but memories of better days and a stubborn refusal to let go. Then, life decided to throw me a curveball, pregnant. The two lines on that test might as well have been a crossroads, forcing me to choose between the mess I'd made and the life I'd always dreamed of. Panic set in, a heavy, suffocating thing. Telling Alex felt like defusing a bomb without knowing which wire to cut. His reaction was a cold splash of reality. You need to fix this, he said, his voice devoid of the warmth I'd mistaken for love. Just like that, the fantasy shattered. Choosing to keep the baby was the first decision I'd made in a long time that felt right, a chance to mend fences with Michael. I ended things with Alex, cutting him out like the cancer he was. But the scars remained, a constant reminder of the price of my mistakes. That decision, though, it was more than just choosing between two men. It was about choosing who I wanted to be, the kind of life I wanted for my child. The damage was done, yeah, but maybe, just maybe, there was still a chance for redemption. Hey everyone, I hope you're enjoying the video so far. If you do, please take a moment to hit that like button, it really helps me out and lets me know you appreciate the content. Also, if you haven't already, consider subscribing to the channel. Subscribing is a great way to stay updated with all the latest videos and to be part of our growing community. It's quick, it's free, and it ensures you won't miss out on any upcoming content. So go ahead, smash that like button and hit subscribe. Your support means a lot and keeps this channel going. Thanks for watching. The moment Michael found out about the pregnancy, our world imploded. It was like watching a slow-motion car crash, you know the impact's coming, but you're just too frozen to do anything about it. His face, usually so open and understanding, closed off as he pieced together the timeline, his trust in me crumbling right before my eyes. How could you? He asked, his voice a mix of hurt and disbelief. I couldn't bear the weight of the lies anymore. So, I spilled everything about Alex, the affair, the late-night messages, the hotel receipts. I laid it all bare, begging Michael to see the remorse eating me up inside. He just sat there, stone-faced, absorbing my confession without a word. It was like talking to a statue. The next day, Michael packed a bag and left. Said he needed space to think, to figure out if there was anything left of us to save. Watching him go, I felt the full weight of my choices crashing down on me. Alone, with our baby on the way, the future seemed more uncertain than ever. As if on cue, Alex turned spiteful. The man I thought I knew twisted into someone unrecognizable, spreading vicious rumors about me to anyone who'd listen. My phone, once a lifeline to friends, became eerily silent. I was isolated, cut off from the world we used to share. I tried reaching out to Michael, sending letters, texts, voicemails, anything to bridge the chasm between us. All I got back were cold, formal replies, if at all. It felt like trying to grasp smoke. The more I reached, the more he slipped away. Then, amidst the storm, a moment of peace. Our daughter was born. She had Michael's eyes, that same clear gaze that had drawn me to him all those years ago. I sent him photos, a silent plea for him to see the beauty we'd created together. But silence was all that returned, a void where his voice should have been. Alex's final blow came in the form of a lawsuit, accusing me of defamation. The irony wasn't lost on me, he was the one who'd turned my life upside down, and now he was playing the victim. The legal fees piled up, draining what little savings I had left. It was a nightmare that seemed to have no end, a battle I was fighting on too many fronts. In that darkness, the light of my daughter's smile was the only thing that kept me grounded. Her innocence, untouched by the chaos around her, was a bittersweet reminder of what could have been. And as I faced each day the battle for my reputation, for my family, and for my own peace of mind, I clung to the hope that somehow, someway, I'd find a way back from the edge. When Michael filed for divorce, it wasn't just a piece of paper, it was the crumbling of every dream I'd ever had with him. Irreconcilable differences, the document stated coldly, as if our years together could be boiled down to such sterile terms. The moment I read those words, a tidal wave of reality crashed over me, sweeping away the last remnants of hope I'd clung to. The custody battle for our daughter was a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Michael, with his sharp legal mind and the damning evidence of my betrayal, had the upper hand from the start. I fought tooth and nail, not just for her, but for a chance at redemption. Yet, deep down, I knew it was a losing battle. The court's decision hit me like a freight train. Full custody to Michael, supervised visits for me, it was more than losing, it was being deemed unworthy. Standing there, in that sterile courtroom, the finality of the judge's words was a weight I wasn't prepared to bear. My heart shattered, not just for me, but for the precious moments I'd miss with my daughter, the everyday miracles of her growing up that I'd be a spectator to, at best. Driven by a mix of desperation and anger, I confronted Alex. His studio, once a place of allure and excitement, now felt like the epicenter of my destruction. I demanded he drop the lawsuit, that he stop this vendetta that was costing me everything. But Alex, ever the artist of his own narrative, merely smirked and turned me away. There was no remorse in his eyes, only the satisfaction of watching me crumble. Retreating back to my canvases, I sought solace in the swirl of paints, channeling my agony into art. Each stroke was a word unspoken, each color a fragment of my shattered life. The pieces I created were a far cry from the vibrant works I once prided myself on. They were dark, tumultuous echoes of my inner chaos. Then came the news that felt like a knife twisting in an already fatal wound. Michael had remarried. His new wife, by all accounts, was everything I wasn't: stable, nurturing, a beacon of light in the life I'd darkened. Hearing about how she doted on our daughter, the stability she provided, was a bitter pill that no amount of swallowing could ease. My mistakes had paved the way for another to build the home I'd destroyed. The dismissal of Alex's lawsuit should have been a victory, but it tasted like ash in my mouth. Yes, I was freed from one more chain, but the freedom came too late. My reputation, once the hallmark of my identity, was now marred by scandal and whispers. The art community, which had once embraced me, now regarded me with a mix of pity and disdain. This chapter of my life, marked by loss and tainted by betrayal, forced me to confront the hardest truths about myself. In the pursuit of what I thought I wanted, I'd lost everything that truly mattered. The journey back to myself, to some semblance of peace, was going to be a long one, paved not just with regret but with a determination to rebuild, piece by broken piece. The day I spotted Michael and our daughter in the park was like a scene straight out of a movie I never wanted to watch. There they were, in a bubble of blissful normalcy, while I stood on the outside, a ghost of the family picture. Watching them. Laughter floating in the air. A lump formed in my throat, heavy with the full realization of what I'd thrown away. In a moment that reeked of desperation and longing, I approached them. "Michael, please," I started, my voice barely a whisper, choked with emotions. Can I just be a part of her life? Anyway, I'll take anything." His hesitation was a glimmer of hope, but it flickered out as he turned and walked away, our daughter's hand in his, leaving me drowning in silence. Moving to a smaller apartment felt like stepping into a physical manifestation of my new reality. Gone were the spacious rooms and the laughter that filled them. In their place, a cramped space that echoed my solitary existence. My days bled into each other, a monotonous cycle of work and lonely evenings, the silence a constant reminder of the life I once had. When I heard Alex had left town, a part of me felt relieved. Yet, that relief was tinged with a profound loneliness, the finality of his departure closing a chapter one wished I'd never open. His absence left a void, not of love, but of tumult, a strange silence after a storm. The visits with my daughter became my lifeline, islands of joy in a sea of remorse. Her laughter, pure and untainted, pierced through the fog of my despair, a beacon reminding me of the love I'd compromised, the innocence I vowed to protect but ultimately endangered. Then came Michael's letter, a formal request laced with a finality that took my breath away. For her well-being, it read, an unspoken accusation that stung more than any argument we'd ever had. That letter wasn't just paper, it was a wall he'd erected, one I couldn't scale without causing more harm to the one person who mattered most. Slowly, as the seasons changed, the art community began to open its doors to me once again. My paintings, a visceral outpouring of my journey through the tempest of my own making, started to draw attention. Yet, even as accolades came, whispers of my past clung to me like a shadow, a constant reminder of the price of my choices. Finding solace in my work, I poured everything into my canvases, each stroke a step towards redemption, a plea for understanding. Art became my voice when words failed, a bridge to a world I feared I'd lost forever. In the blend of colors, the chaos of my emotions found order, and in that order, a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, I could rebuild from the ruins. Kicking off my solo art exhibit felt like baring my soul to the world. There, on those white walls, hung my journey, every brushstroke a chapter, every color a raw emotion. The crowd buzzed with a mix of admiration for the art and whispers about the artist. It was a cocktail of pride and vulnerability, a high like no other. But pride can be a precarious thing. Amidst the clinking glasses and hushed tones, I caught snippets of conversations not meant for my ears. "Can you believe she's the one who," the words stung, slicing through the evening's charm? My public facade of strength cracked, then shattered. I left my own exhibit early, the taste of humiliation bitter in my mouth. The aftermath wasn't just emotional. My body revolted against the stress and heartache, a cruel reminder that you can't outrun your problems, not really. Health issues cropped up, laying me low, forcing me to confront the toll my choices had taken on me, not just mentally, but physically too. Then came the conversation with my mom. She'd been a silent pillar all this while, but silence has a way of building up, doesn't it? "I'm so disappointed in you," she said, her voice a mix of sorrow and disbelief. Her words were a reflection I couldn't escape, a painful acknowledgement of the havoc I'd wreaked on my own life. Therapy was my next step, a dive into the murky waters of guilt and depression. Each session was a battle, a confrontation with the darkest parts of myself. Yet, through that pain, I started to find something resembling forgiveness, not from others, but from the person I needed it from the most, me. As my health began to rebound, so did my resolve to be there for my daughter, to salvage whatever fragments of a relationship I could during those supervised visits. It was a chance to show her the love that never wavered, even when everything else did. Unexpectedly, Michael's wife reached out, a gesture that took me by surprise. "Let's do what's best for her," she said, her voice cautious but kind. It was a small olive branch, but in the desert of our interactions, it felt like an oasis. Our daughter's birthday party became a testament to that fragile truce. Michael and I, together yet apart, surrounded by the innocent laughter of children, including our own. The air was thick with unspoken words and what-ifs, yet there we were, putting on brave faces, united by a love for our daughter that transcended the mess we'd made. That day, as I watched our daughter blow out her candles, a simple yet profound wish echoed silently in my heart. A wish for healing, for understanding, and maybe, just maybe, for a future where the scars we bore could lead us to a place of peace. Diving headfirst into writing my memoir was like ripping off a band-aid. Each word, a step towards confronting the mess I'd made, my journey from love to the depths of loss and back. It was raw, unfiltered, and brutally honest. Sitting at my desk, I poured everything onto those pages, the good, the bad, and the downright ugly. It was me, no holds barred, owning up to every mistake, every tear, and every moment of joy I'd experienced. When the memoir hit the shelves, I braced for impact, ready for backlash, for judgment, for pity. Instead, what I got was an outpouring of support, critical acclaim that took me by surprise. My story, it seemed, resonated with more people than I dared to hope. Suddenly, I was not just the woman from the scandal. I was an author, a speaker, someone with something worth saying. One of the most surreal moments came during a speaking engagement. After my talk, a young woman approached me, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and determination. "Your story, it gave me the courage to leave a situation I knew was destroying me," she confessed. Her words were a balm to the guilt that still lingered, a sign that maybe, just maybe, my mess could serve as a message. But life has a way of throwing curveballs. At a parent-teacher conference, Michael and I found ourselves together, not as adversaries but as co-parents concerned about our daughter. The conversation was awkward, tentative, but beneath the surface, there was a glimmer of something new. It was the beginning of a truce, a step toward something resembling peace. Inspired by my own journey, I set up a scholarship for single mothers pursuing the arts. It was my way of giving back, of lifting others from the pit of despair I knew all too well. The scholarship wasn't just about financial aid, it was a message of hope, a declaration that your past does not define your future. Then came the news of Michael's wife's illness. The woman who had stepped into the life I'd vacated was suddenly vulnerable, and without a second thought, I offered to help with our daughter. It was an odd, unexpected role reversal, but it brought a new level of understanding and, dare I say, respect between us. The day Michael drove away with our daughter after one of my visits marked the end of a chapter. Standing there, watching them leave, the autumn breeze stirred memories of a day long gone, a day filled with hope and promises. It was a poignant reminder of the cycle of life, of love and loss, and of the resilience of the human spirit. As I turned to walk back into my house, alone yet not defeated, I realized that this journey, with all its ups and downs, had brought me to a place of strength I never knew I had. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face it, armed with the lessons learned and the knowledge that from the ashes of my past. Tuesday morning, I'm in our kitchen, whipping up pancakes, the smell of coffee filling the air. Tom, my husband, comes in, grabs a mug, and plants this kiss on my forehead like he's off to save the world, not just heading to his tech job. It was like something out of a cheesy rom-com, but it was our life, and I loved every bit of it. Fast forward to Friday night. We're at Luigi's, the kind of place where they know your order before you even sit down. Halfway through the meal, Tom drops this bombshell. He's like, "What do you think about us having an open relationship?" I nearly choked on my spaghetti. He said it'd make us stronger, but all I could think was, is this guy for real? Took me a whole week of, what the hell? Moments before I said yes. I figured, maybe it's like adding jalapenos to your pizza, you're scared it'll burn, but sometimes it just works. Tom was stoked, said it proved how much I trusted us. Then, bam, along comes Alex. Met him at this little gallery downtown. He had this vibe, you know, like he could see right through to your soul with that camera of his. I hadn't felt a spark like that since Tom. And when I told Tom about him, expecting World War III, he was all for it. Go explore, he said. I swear, if he was any more chill, he'd be a snowman. Alex and I hit it off big time. Ended up spending a weekend at this cabin he knew about. It was like stepping into another world, one where it was just us, our stories, and the stars. Felt like I was finding pieces of me I didn't even know were missing. But coming back home, that was like stepping into a freezer. Tom was distant, glued to his laptop, and every conversation felt like pulling teeth. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, like I'd walked back into the wrong life. So, there you have it. My picture-perfect marriage was starting to look a little less perfect. And me? I was smack in the middle of it, trying to figure out if the heat I was feeling was from the new spice in my life or the beginning of a house fire. Let me tell you, nothing says, "Good morning." Like finding a receipt for a diamond necklace you definitely didn't get for your birthday. It was just another Tuesday, or so I thought, until I reached into Tom's coat for the car keys and out comes this piece of paper that might as well have been a grenade. And that wasn't the end of it. Tucked behind it was a hotel booking for a weekend I spent at my sister's. Talk about a wake-up call, right? I spent the whole day pacing around the house, that receipt burning a hole in my pocket. Part of me wanted to just throw it in his face the second he walked through the door and watch him squirm. But then what? I couldn't shake this fear that confronting him would be the final nail in the coffin of whatever was left of us. So, I chickened out. I decided to play the part of the clueless wife a little longer. That's where Alex came in. Remember Alex? The photographer with the soulful eyes and a laugh that made you forget your troubles? I called him up, half hoping he wouldn't answer so I could say I tried. But he did, and before I knew it, I was pouring my heart out to him over coffee in this dimly lit cafe that suddenly felt like the only safe place in the world. Alex, bless his heart, didn't even try to offer solutions. He just listened, and sometimes, that's all you need, you know? The plot, as they say, thickened when I bumped into Sarah at the grocery store. Sarah's one of those people who knows everything about everyone. She casually mentioned seeing Tom out with this young intern from his office. They looked cozy, she said, stirring her coffee, oblivious to the bomb she'd just dropped. My head was spinning. Was this the mystery girl from the I couldn't just sit and stew in my own jealousy and hurt? I needed to know more. So, I did what any sane person would do in the 21st century, I hired a private investigator. Sounds drastic, I know, but desperate times call for desperate measures. A week later, I got an email that felt like a punch to the gut. Photos of Tom and the intern, looking way too close for comfort, and a string of messages that left nothing to the imagination. Armed to the teeth with evidence, I waited for Tom to come home. My heart was racing as I laid it all out on the table, literally. The photos, the messages, the receipts. His face went through 50 shades of red and white. And then, the kicker, he blamed our open relationship. Said it was my yes that opened this Pandora's box. As if his lying and cheating were somehow my fault. It was surreal, standing there, watching the man I married try to squirm his way out of the web of lies he'd spun. I wanted to scream, to cry, to throw something. But I didn't. I just stood there, silently mourning the death of the trust and love I thought we had. It was clear as day that whatever we had, or thought we had, was gone. And no amount of talking was going to bring it back. So, where did we leave off? Oh, right, the showdown. Picture this. It's D-Day in our cozy living room, which suddenly feels more like a battleground. I'm there, standing my ground, while Tom's on the couch, looking like a kid who got caught stealing cookies. I lay it out for him, plain and simple. It's her or me, Tom. Your call. I felt like one of those badass heroines from the movies, you know? But here's the kicker, Tom, he doesn't miss a beat. Looks me dead in the eyes and says, I choose her. I love her. Just like that. As if our years together meant nothing. As if they were just a prelude to this in turn. Talk about a gut punch. I was so stunned, I couldn't even cry. It was like all the air got sucked out of the room. Next thing I know, I'm sitting in this stark, too bright office across from a lawyer who's rattling off about assets, custody, alimony. Words that felt too cold and clinical for something as messy as a broken heart. I nod along, pretending to understand, pretending I'm not just thinking about how it all came to this. Then the divorce proceedings start, and let me tell you, it's like war. Every meeting, every call, it's just attack and defend. Tom and I, we turned into strangers, throwing barbs over who gets the coffee table and who screwed up more. The whole thing felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life fall apart on some trashy TV drama. But here's where I decided I wasn't going to just roll over and play dead. I was hurt, sure, but I was also angry. Furious, actually. So, I cooked up a little plan to even the score. I had all this dirt on Tom's affair, thanks to my detective stint, and what better way to use it than to send it all to his company's HR. Anonymously, of course. I was shaking as I hit send on that email, but boy, did it feel good. Didn't take long for the bomb to go off. Tom got suspended, pending an investigation. His perfect career, the one he always put before everything else, was suddenly on the line. And me? I couldn't help but smile at the thought of him squirming, trying to explain his way out of this mess. So, there I was, feeling like I'd scored a point in this twisted game. But it was a hollow victory, you know? It didn't bring back what we had, didn't heal any wounds. It just made me one of those people who sought revenge. And let me tell you, sitting alone in that big, empty house, I realized revenge might taste sweet, but it sure as hell doesn't fill you up. You know, when you start down a path of revenge, they say you should dig 2 graves. I never really got that until now. So, after the whole HR debacle, I wasn't done yet. Nope, I had more cards to play in this twisted game. I went full scorched earth and leaked the whole sordid affair to every industry blog that would listen. And boy, did they eat it up. Tom's name was mud, plastered across headlines and trending on social media like some kind of cautionary tale. I remember sitting there, scrolling through the comments, seeing the world tear him apart. Part of me was thrilled, like I was finally getting some justice. But another part, it felt like watching a car crash in slow motion, horrifying, but you can't look away. Then came the divorce settlement. The day we signed those papers was supposed to feel like victory. I walked away with the house, a fat chunk of his assets, and a sense of triumph. But as I stood there, in that big, empty house that used to be our home, the wind felt empty. It was just me and the echoes of a life that used to be. And Alex, the one person who'd been my solace through this storm. He dropped the news like a bombshell. He was leaving, moving abroad for a job opportunity he couldn't pass up. Just like that, I was alone. Again. It felt like the universe was playing some cruel joke on me, stripping away the people I cared about one by one. With the divorce public and the scandal all anyone could talk about, my social circle shrank to the size of a postage stamp. Friends we'd shared for years suddenly had other commitments, and the invites dried up. I was the pariah, the woman who'd aired her dirty laundry for the world to see, and now I was paying the price. Sitting in that silence, the weight of my decisions pressing down on me, I started to reflect. What had all this revenge gotten me? Sure. Tom was suffering, his career and reputation in tatters. But me? I was more alone than ever, haunted by the ghost of our marriage and the love we used to share. The satisfaction I thought I'd feel was just a mirage, leaving me emptier than before. It hit me then, that saying about two graves. My revenge hadn't just destroyed Tom, it had taken a piece of me with it. I'd set out to make him pay, but in the end, the cost was mine to bear. I was left to wonder, was it worth it? The answer, as I sat in the quiet of my too big, too empty house, was clear. No, it wasn't. So, there I was, trying to stitch my life back together, one piece at a time. I figured, hey, why not dive into something new, right? So, I picked up painting. Not that I was any Picasso, but slapping paint on a canvas felt kinda therapeutic. And I even joined this local book club, trying to find some kind of connection, some sort of distraction from the mess. But here's the thing about trying to fill a void, it's like throwing pebbles into an ocean and expecting a splash. The loneliness was still there, gnawing at me. Every brush stroke, every page turn, I was reminded of what I'd lost. It wasn't just Tom I missed, it was the us we used to be, the team, the partnership. And the money, sure. The divorce settlement left me financially secure, more or less. But every time I looked at something I bought with that money, it felt like I was trying to buy happiness. Spoiler alert. It doesn't work. There's this emptiness that fancy things just can't fill, a kind of hollow feeling when you realize that no amount of shopping sprees can patch up a broken heart. Then came the party. You know, one of those gatherings you go to, telling yourself you're back in the game. Except, there he was, Tom, looking like he hadn't a care in the world, laughing and chatting with the intern, now not so much an intern from the looks of it. Seeing them together, so happy, it was like a punch to the gut. We ended up talking, if you can call it that. It was the most awkward exchange, all polite nods and cold smiles. None of the warmth, the inside jokes, or the easy banter we used to have. It was like talking to a stranger who looked a lot like the man I married. I walked away from that conversation feeling colder than I had in a long time. And just when I thought I'd hit rock bottom, I heard through the grapevine that Tom had landed some big shot position at a rival company. Great, right? Good for him. Except, hearing about his success felt like salt on an open wound. It wasn't that I wanted him to fail, but it made me wonder what I was doing with my life. That's when it hit me, the real loss wasn't just Tom or the marriage. It was me. I'd lost myself in this whole ordeal, caught up in revenge and bitterness. And for what, he'd moved on, and here I was, stuck in the past, nursing my wounds. So, yeah, there I was, trying to figure out my next move. Starting over sounded great on paper, but the reality was a lot messier. It was like I was learning to live all over again, trying to find joy in the little things and make peace with the big things. Not easy, let me tell you. But maybe, just maybe, it was possible. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, they did. Picture this. I'm sipping my morning coffee, already dreading the day, when I get this letter. Tom's suing me. For defamation, no less, because of the whole scandal I'd unleashed. It felt like a bad joke, you know? Here I was, barely hanging on, and now this. The community backlash was swift and brutal. Friends, or what I thought were friends, turned their backs on me. Whispers at the grocery store, pointed stares at the post office, and an inbox full of hate mail. It was like I was the villain in their story, the one who'd stirred the pot too much. I tried to keep my head high, but let me tell you, it was tough. So, I started to rebuild. Or at least, I tried to. I threw myself into work, took up jogging, anything to find a semblance of normalcy. But it's hard to rebuild when the foundation's been rocked, you know? Everything felt off, like I was living someone else's life and doing a pretty bad job at it. Then came the holidays. You don't realize how much you lean on another person until you're going through the motions alone. Decorating the tree, watching those cheesy movies, even cooking dinner, it all felt empty. The loneliness was like a constant shadow, a reminder of everything that had gone wrong. The court date loomed over me like a dark cloud. Standing there, in front of the judge, facing Tom and his lawyer, I've never felt so small. He looked at me, but there was nothing there. No anger, no sadness, just nothing. It was like we were strangers. And when the judge ruled in his favor, ordering me to pay damages, it was the final nail in the coffin. Not just for our marriage, but for the life I'd known. I walked out of that courtroom feeling defeated. The weight of my choices, of my revenge, hit me like a ton of bricks. Financially, I was a mess. Emotionally, even worse. It was in that moment, walking alone to my car, that I finally understood the cost of my actions. I'd wanted to make Tom pay, to hurt him like he'd hurt me, but in the end, the person who paid the highest price was me. Reflecting on everything, I realized revenge might offer a momentary satisfaction, but it's fleeting. And the aftermath, the loneliness, the community turning their back on me, the legal mess, it wasn't worth it. I'd lost so much more than I'd gained. I wish I could say I found some profound peace or that I had an epiphany about forgiveness, but life isn't a movie. All I knew was that I needed to find a way forward, to somehow pick up the pieces of my life and start again. But, this time, I knew revenge wouldn't be part of the story. So, here's the deal. I've been trying to move on, really trying. Focusing on work, hitting the gym, even took up meditation, anything to stop the past from haunting every waking moment. But it's like my life's become this movie on repeat, where every good part is shadowed by what went down with Tom. Then, as if I needed more drama, work hit a snag. Projects I was banking on got shelved, and those legal battles? They just kept coming, like waves crashing over me, each one threatening to pull me under. It felt like every step forward ended with me 2 steps back. In the midst of this chaos, I found a sliver of hope, or so I thought. Started volunteering at this local charity, helping out at the food bank. It was supposed to be my shot at redemption, a way to make something right in a world where I'd made so much go wrong. For a while, it felt good, meaningful even. But at the end of the day, I'd go home to an empty house, the silence a stark reminder of my solitude. That's the thing about professional success, it's supposed to make you feel accomplished, proud. But every achievement felt hollow, echoing in the emptiness of my place. There was no one to share it with, no one to say, "Hey, great job." It's like I'd built this wall around myself, brick by brick, and now I was trapped inside it. One night, sitting in the quiet of my too empty living room, it all hit me. The weight of everything that had happened, the choices I'd made, and where those choices had led me. It was this moment of painful clarity, realizing that the damage done wasn't just to my marriage or my social life, but to my very soul. I'd changed, morphed into someone I barely recognized. Someone who chose revenge over healing, isolation over forgiveness. And in that solitary reflection, the truth was undeniable. I'd lost more than a husband. I'd lost a part of myself, that hopeful, loving part that believed in second chances and happy endings. The journey from love to betrayal to revenge had left me a stranger in my own life. So, here I am, acknowledging the change, the transformation that's both armor and prison. I sit alone, not just in my home, but in my existence, pondering what comes next. The future stretches out, a blank canvas that's both terrifying and liberating. There's no redemption arc waiting, no magical resolution to tie up the loose ends. The story ends not with a bang, but with a whisper, a quiet acceptance of the solitude that's become my companion, the peace found in surrendering to the journey, no matter how lonely it may be. It's not the ending I wanted, nor the one I worked for, but it's where I am. And maybe, just maybe, it's the first step towards something new, something real. After all, when you've got nothing left to lose, you're free to find yourself.